someone is coming out to us because very possibly they feel a sense of belonging with us, or they felt a sense of belonging with us. And our response can help the other person feel that they still belong, or it can generate the painful experience that to belong means they cannot be themselves with us. So when someone comes out to you, they're taking a risk with you, a risk of belonging, a risk of emotional safety.
I don't like to argue, so I say nothing and fume for days.
How do I set boundaries without sounding like a jerk?
I hate the idea that I might accidentally offend somebody, so sometimes I'd just rather say nothing at all.
Welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast, and thank you for joining me today. This is your host, Alejandra, a transformative communication teacher and coach. I am devoted to helping multicultural individuals and couples on the path of transformation transform their lives and relationships through conscious communication. Thank you so much for being here and spending time with me today. Whether this is your first Language Alchemy podcast episode or whether you've been listening to me for a while, I'm thankful you're here. Especially today, because today I have a very useful episode that can help you and people close to you feel safe, seen, and valued by you. So let's dive in. In my years as a transformative communication teacher and coach, I've helped many of my clients who wanted to authentically and skillfully communicate who they are to others come out of the closet. And whether you know this or not, it's very likely that there are people in your life, people you interact with, who are in the closet. Yes, people in your life who identify themselves as part of the LGBTQ community. So they identify themselves as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer. But chances are that you don't know this about them. Because sadly, there's still a lot of stigma about this. And in many countries, being openly gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or queer can send people to jail, or it can get you killed. But even in countries like the United States, where I live, and where we devote the whole month of June to talk about and celebrate the LGBTQ community, members of the community still face aggression, violence, and insecurity in heteronormative spaces. Most of the clients I have helped come out have experienced discrimination, aggression, intolerance, bullying, and even violence. So if you are like me, a cisgender and heterosexual person, unless the LGBTQ people in your life know about your views and behaviors related to LGBTQ folks, they may not come out to you, or it may take them a long time to come out to you. And speaking of coming out, I want to share the origin of that idiomatic expression. In the beginning, the expression coming out was not used by the LGBTQ community to inform the world about identifying as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer, and wanting to be seen and accepted as such. According to an article from Time magazine, the phrase coming out had been used for a long time and is still being used to introduce elite young women into society so that they could be matched with a male suitor. So the phrase coming out came out from a heteronormative space. In fact, in that article, they explained that historian George Chauncey, who wrote a book titled Gay New York, Gender, Urban Culture, and the Making of the Gay Male World, he wrote that before World War II, an aristocratic group of gay men, and I quote, came out at drag balls modeled after the debutante balls in the United States' biggest cities. Just like in these aristocratic parties, young women were introduced to aristocratic male suitors, people in the LGBT community were coming out to other people in their own community, not to people in their families or at work. Because at that time, that was very dangerous. It could cost them their belonging, their jobs, and even their lives. Some decades later, the term coming out became more personal, and it became about coming out to the people in one's own life. But what's so interesting here about the history of the phrase coming out in the context of the LGBTQ identity, in Chauncey's views, in order to quote unquote come out, it is implied that one must have belonged to something. One must have been in something. This is important to note because when someone is coming out to us, it is because they feel they're part of something with us, that they belong to our group, to our family, our circle of friends, our community, or our relationship as friends or coworkers. With all my clients whom I had the honor of helping come out to their families, their friends, and work environments, I know that there's always been the fear of how others will respond. And that fear is very specific. The fear is basically, will others accept me? Will I still belong? Or will the other reject me and therefore lose the sense, the ability, or the privilege of belonging? Is it safe to be me with you? These are the questions that my clients who came out grappled with. So when someone is coming out to us, it's important to bear all this in mind. Someone is coming out to us because very possibly they feel a sense of belonging with us, or they felt a sense of belonging with us. And our response can help the other person feel that they still belong, or it can generate the painful experience that to belong means they cannot be themselves with us. So when someone comes out to you, they're taking a risk with you, a risk of belonging, a risk of emotional safety. And if they feel that that risk is too big with you, then they will feel unsafe coming out. How we respond when someone comes out to us is very important. And you listening to this episode right now, I know you are a compassionate, loving, and mature adult who wants to relieve the suffering for the people in your life rather than increase it. And so I have some do's and some don'ts as to how to respond when someone comes out to you. In this week's episode, I am going to share 3 don'ts. And in next week's episode, I am going to talk about the do's as to how to respond skillfully when someone comes out to you. Let's start with the don'ts. Number 1, this may seem obvious to you, but it's important to remember not to shame the person who's coming out. Shame can be communicated directly or indirectly. Shaming someone directly could be as simple as shame on you, or something like, after all I've done for you, you are going to destroy our family? Even saying this out loud just feels so painful inside my body. But the truth is that some of my clients heard this as a response when they came out to members of their family. Shaming can also be indirect. A friend of mine whom I asked if I could share about her experience in the podcast, and she gave me permission, told me that when she came out, she decided to tell her mother first because her father grew up in a fundamentalist Christian family. It took my friend 4 years to gather the bravery to come out as queer to her mother. And when she did, her mother said, I don't see why you have to tell anyone about this. This response could be indirect shame, or it could be interpreted as an indirect form of shaming. So again, the first don't is do not shame the person coming out, either directly or indirectly. Don't number 2, don't flood the person coming out with questions. A client of mine shared that when she came out to her first boss a couple of decades ago when she was in her 20s, that boss started asking her all sorts of questions. And this was so painful for her that soon after that, she left the job and moved to another part of the country. And not only that, she waited more than a decade to come out to anyone in her professional environment again. And this is why she came to work with me. She was tired of hiding her authentic self. So first, we worked on cultivating confidence and a sense of inner safety. And after 6 months of transformative communication coaching, she was able to come out in a way that felt not only confident, but also healing for her. So if someone comes out, it's natural to be curious. And if you're curious, you may ask some questions, but don't turn it into an interrogation session. So avoid asking question after question after question, such as, when did you find out? How did you find out? Do you have a crush on someone? Are you going to have any surgeries? Do you take hormones? Why didn't you tell me before? What are you going to do next? Or anything that the person coming out to you is not talking about. You heard me say before that communication depends on the context, but if there were a rule here, in this case, it would be don't ask questions about anything the other person is not addressing. And number 3, do not respond with an expression that makes it about you, such as, I knew it, or I had my suspicions, or I was wondering when you were going to finally tell me, or wow, you had this hidden for a long time, or you should have told me years ago. If you say one of these responses immediately after someone comes out to you, you're doing 2 things. 1, it's passive aggressive, and 2, you are making this about you. When in fact, when someone is coming out, it is about them. It is not about you. Most likely, it's taken the person so much inner work to be able to come out to you. Even if when they are coming out, they are expressing themselves with what you perceive to be confidence and ease, do not make it about you. This is entirely about them. And now let's recap what you've heard. In this episode, I talked to you about the history of the expression coming out. Then I shared that coming out is still something very challenging for a lot of LGBTQIA people. And so it's important to respond in a way that communicates to the person coming out that they're safe with us and they belong with us. And then I mentioned 3 don'ts. Number 1, do not shame the person coming out. Number 2, do not flood the person coming out with questions. And number 3, do not respond with an expression that makes it about you. It is about them. Next week, I'm going to give you 6 do's as to how to respond skillfully when someone is coming out to you. I hope this episode was useful for you. And if you or someone you know would like to come out, or if you need to repair the relationship with someone who came out to you and you did not respond skillfully, I'd be honored to support you with transformative communication coaching. If you'd like my support, you can reach out to me via email. And you have my email if you get my weekly newsletters with transformative communication tools. And if not, you can go to Instagram and DM me. You can find me at Language Alchemy, one word. Or one third option is to go to my website and schedule a consultation with me. And how do you do that? Visit languagealchemy.com/new client. Thank you so much for listening, and a special thanks to all my LGBTQIA+ clients, students, and allies. Until next week, and as we say in Argentina, ciao ciao. Original music by Gary LaPoe. You can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com.